He was just trying to get to his truck. That's it. No drama, no confrontation, no reason to be anyone's target. The old man had done this routine 1,000 times before, morning coffee in hand, keys clenched between weathered fingers, and a gentle, steady walk through the parking lot of a grocery store he'd been going to since before half the neighborhood was even built. But today would be different. Today, a teenager barely old enough to drive would shove him so hard, so fast, that his cane would clatter across the asphalt like a forgotten piece of scrap metal. And for what? Because the kid was in a rush? Because he didn't like being told to watch where you're going? Or was it something deeper, something darker, boiling under that hood of a kid who thought respect was something you demanded, not something you earned? But what the teen didn't know, what none of us ever really expect, is that someone was watching. Someone quiet. Someone with a hood pulled low over his brow. And in less than 3 minutes, this nameless stranger would step forward and completely flip the script. Now, I know why you're here. You saw that title, maybe felt a little fire rise in your chest because you've seen this kind of thing before. Maybe not in person, but on the news, in the comment section, or through a viral TikTok where some punk gets caught disrespecting someone who actually deserves a little damn gratitude. And I want you to know this. By the end of this video, you will get the answer to the question burning in your mind. Who was the guy in the hoodie? Why did he get involved? And what did he do that made even the loudest onlookers fall completely silent? That's what you came here for, right? And trust me, you're gonna get it. But if you jump ahead or click away, you'll miss the part that makes the ending really hit. Because this isn't just about a shove in a parking lot. This is about something a lot bigger, about respect, consequences, and the kind of quiet strength that doesn't scream for attention but can shut down chaos in a heartbeat. Let me talk to you, just for a second, one-on-one. I know your time matters. You could be watching anything right now, Netflix, Reels, some millionaire YouTuber's prank channel, but you clicked on this. That means something. Maybe it's because you're tired of seeing the world flip upside down with no one stepping up to set it right. Maybe you've got a father, a grandfather, an uncle who served this country and now walks a little slower than he used to, but still stands taller than most people ever will. Or maybe you've been that stranger in the hoodie before. The one who didn't want credit, didn't want attention, just couldn't walk away from something that was dead wrong. Whatever your reason, you're here now. And I promise, stick with me, stay through the story, and by the time we reach the end, not only will you understand exactly what went down that day, but you'll see how one small decision, made in a split second, can echo louder than any shout. So, let's rewind. The sun had just started to dip below the strip mall's edge, that soft golden hour glow painting everything in long shadows. The kind of evening that feels peaceful, almost sleepy, where even the cars rolling through seem to move a little slower, like the world's catching its breath after a long day. And right there, in that moment, we meet Mr. Richard Lawson. 79 years old, retired Army sergeant, Vietnam vet, and the kind of man who still opens doors for strangers and says, "Sir," even to teenagers who don't deserve it. He's got this calm way about him, the kind that comes from surviving things most of us can't even imagine. No fanfare, no medals on display, just a flannel shirt, a quiet smile, and eyes that have seen the worst and still look for the best in people. But across the lot, leaning against a matte black Dodge Charger, is someone who couldn't be more different. Tall, lean, maybe 17 or 18, with a face that's more attitude than age. His name's Jordan, though we won't learn that just yet, and from the outside, he looks like every stereotype rolled into one. Sagging pants, blaring music from his phone speaker, and a scowl that dares anyone to look at him too long. But let me be clear, this isn't about demonizing teens or painting everyone with the same brush. There's always more under the surface. And Jordan's surface is hiding a lot. Anger, frustration, maybe some pain he hasn't figured out how to name yet. All of it bubbling just under the skin, looking for a place to land. And when Mr. Lawson steps too close, barely brushing past a sneaker, it's like a lit match dropped in gasoline. Now, you might expect yelling, maybe a few harsh words. But what happens instead is worse. Jordan doesn't argue. He doesn't talk. He shoves. Hard. One hand to the chest, full force. Mr. Lawson stumbles back like he's been hit by something more than just a kid's hand. His cane skids across the asphalt. The coffee he's holding spills out like a small explosion. And for a second, the entire world seems to stop. No one moves. No one speaks. Because something sacred has just been shattered right there in broad daylight. And everybody knows it. Except Jordan. He's already halfway back to his car, hoodie up now, acting like he didn't just shove someone's grandfather to the ground. Maybe he thinks no one will say anything. Maybe he's counting on it. But what he doesn't see, what none of them see, is the other figure standing at the edge of the parking lot. Motionless. Watching. Hoodie up. Hands in pockets. The stranger. Here's where things take a turn. You're going to want to hear what happens next, because the moment this stranger steps forward, everything changes. Not with a punch. Not with violence. But with something far more powerful. And the way he handles the situation? Let's just say it leaves an impression on everyone there and sends Jordan walking away a different person than he was 5 minutes earlier. Who is this guy? Is he ex-military? A martial artist? Just someone raised right? That's what we're about to uncover. But not yet. Not just yet. Because right now, all you need to know is this. The man in the hoodie didn't come there looking for trouble. He didn't come to teach anyone a lesson. But life has a funny way of putting people exactly where they need to be when someone else needs a wake-up call. And in this case, that call is coming fast. With no warning. And no way to ignore it. You're about to see what happens when disrespect meets discipline. But first, let's go back to where it all started. Ready? Let's begin. Earlier that week, the man in the hoodie, whose name still remained a mystery to every witness at that parking lot, wasn't just drifting through town like some accidental hero. He had a purpose. He always did. Those who'd known him years ago remembered him differently. Sharp eyes, military posture, that quiet edge you only get after seeing more than you should and surviving it. But these days, he moved through life under the radar. No flashy car, no social media trail, no one tagging him in vacation photos or birthday parties. Just a small gym bag, a pair of worn sneakers, and a face that blended into crowds without effort. Some folks claimed they'd seen him helping out at the local community center a few nights a week, mostly staying late, working with kids who were hanging by a thread, kids like Jordan, though he didn't know that yet. Others swore they'd spotted him just days before at a local VA hospital, sitting silently by the bedside of a man who hadn't spoken in weeks, holding his hand through the shaking. The truth? Most didn't know his name, let alone where he came from. And that's exactly how he liked it. But if you followed his trail closely enough, you'd find signs, pieces of a life scattered like breadcrumbs. A black duffel tucked into the back of a storage unit with nothing but old military documents and a carefully folded flag inside. A burner phone with just a few numbers saved, a nurse named Monica from the VA clinic, a boxing coach in a rundown part of town, and someone labeled only as Cap. You'd wonder why a man like this had no real ties, and then you'd hear whispers, stories told in hushed tones, about what he used to do for a living. Special forces. Private security. Undercover work overseas. No one could quite agree. And maybe that was the point, because what mattered wasn't who he was, but what he carried inside. That quiet sense of duty. The instinct to step in when no one else would. The kind of man who watches a kid shove a defenseless vet and doesn't just clench his jaw or shake his head, he moves. But let's rewind again, because something strange happened just the night before. He was walking back from the late-night diner, hood up, earbuds in, that same even pace he always kept. It was then that he noticed the black Dodge Charger. Not parked. Not idling. Just circling the block. Once. Twice. 3 times. And in the driver's seat, a silhouette, young, agitated, hand-tapping the wheel like he was itching for something. He didn't approach, didn't react, just watched. Noticed the out-of-state tags, the deep bass rattling the window glass, the way the driver kept looking at his phone between turns. It was a familiar pattern, not just joyriding. No. Something else was boiling beneath the surface. And it wasn't just teenage rebellion. That same Charger, of course, would show up the next day in the grocery store lot. And that's where things start to feel less random, more calculated. Because Jordan, though still a kid by legal standards, wasn't exactly new to conflict. He'd been suspended twice in the past year, once for getting in a fight outside a fast food joint and again for threatening a substitute teacher. A probation officer had even flagged him as at risk, though no one seemed to follow up. His mother, exhausted and working double shifts at a local urgent care, had done everything she could. His father had left long ago. No goodbye. Just vanished. That absence left a hole no one else could fill. So Jordan filled it with noise, with dominance, with the kind of false confidence that only hard stares and loud music can offer. And yet, there's something else, something that still doesn't add up. Because according to security footage from the plaza, Jordan wasn't alone when he arrived. He'd been talking to someone just out of frame, tall, wearing a ball cap low over their eyes. No clear footage. No plate on the car they drove off in. But it was clear they handed him something. A small object, maybe a phone, maybe something else. Then they walked away, leaving Jordan standing there, more charged up than before. Was it just a friend hyping him up? Or someone pushing him to provoke a situation? And if so, why? And what were they really after? As our hooded stranger stepped into the scene, silent, slow, deliberate, Jordan turned slightly, just enough to catch his presence. Their eyes didn't meet yet, but the tension shifted. Something in the air grew heavier, like a storm cloud rolling in on a sunny day. But what no one saw coming, not even Jordan, was that this wasn't a confrontation fueled by ego or adrenaline. This was something else entirely. A test. And not just for the teen, but for everyone watching, bystanders frozen by fear, convenience, or just plain apathy. Meanwhile, Mr. Lawson had been helped up by two shoppers. His cane was retrieved. A slight tremble ran through his hands, but his eyes remained clear, fixed on the young man who had knocked him down. No anger, just disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than a raised voice ever could. That look, more than anything else, began to chip away at Jordan's armor. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. He still hadn't learned the lesson. That would come in the next few minutes, and it would come without shouting or threats. Only presence. But before we get there, there's still the matter of the unknown figure who met with Jordan earlier. Who were they? Why did they vanish so quickly? And why did Jordan glance toward the edge of the lot twice more, like he was waiting for something or someone? Could this all have been orchestrated? Was the shove really just an impulsive act? Or was there more at play here, a setup? Maybe even a distraction? And what about the stranger in the hoodie? How did he know to be there at just the right time? Coincidence or something deeper? As you're watching this unfold, you might be wondering who's really the main character here. Is it the veteran, the kid, the stranger, or someone else entirely? That's the beauty of real-life stories like this. Everyone plays a part. Everyone holds a piece of the truth. But the question remains, what happens when those pieces finally collide? Don't look away. What comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew about this parking lot standoff. Because in just a few seconds, someone is going to speak, and their words will flip the entire scene on its head. What no one realized in that moment was that something crucial, something that could have changed how the entire situation was understood, had already disappeared. Just minutes before the shove happened, one of the security cameras that pointed directly toward the Charger's parking space had gone dark. Not glitched. Not frozen. It was intentionally disabled. The footage before that moment had been crystal clear, high definition, time-stamped, and showing Jordan pacing near his car with a strange mix of nervous energy and defiance. But right as the mysterious figure handed him that object, the screen cut to static for exactly 57 seconds. When it came back, the stranger was gone, and Jordan looked like someone had just wound him up and let him go. At first, no one noticed. It wasn't until a store manager tried to review the footage later that the gap became obvious. And when the tech team tried to retrieve the missing frames, the system returned a corrupted file warning, like someone had known exactly what they were doing. That wasn't just coincidence. That was intentional. And it meant one thing. Someone didn't want the full truth coming out. That night, after most of the commotion had died down, the man in the hoodie lingered near the back of the parking lot, away from the crowds, near the alleyway between the grocery store and a shuttered dry cleaner. He stood in the shadows, arms folded, watching the scene settle. But he wasn't alone. A voice cut through the quiet, low, urgent, laced with familiarity. "You shouldn't have stepped in." It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't a suggestion either. The speaker stayed mostly hidden, their face barely lit by the fading glow of a street lamp. "There's more going on here than you understand. You think it's just a hot-headed kid? This isn't your battle." The hooded man didn't answer. He didn't flinch, but his body tensed slightly, just enough to signal he wasn't dismissing what had been said. And then, just like that, the shadowed figure turned and walked off, slipping into a waiting sedan that didn't have plates. That warning, cryptic as it was, hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. The next morning, the hooded man returned. Not to the parking lot, but to a rundown boxing gym on the edge of town where he sometimes volunteered. It was a quiet place, the kind of gym that didn't advertise or post flashy videos online. Just real training, sweat, discipline. And there, hanging near the back, was an old corkboard covered in yellowed newspaper clippings and grainy photos. He stared at one for a long time. It showed a much younger version of himself, barely in his 20s, standing in uniform next to a man labeled Lieutenant William Rhodes. Under the photo, a headline, "Heroic Rescue in Kandahar Saves Lives of 24 Civilians." That mission had been buried in classified reports for years. Most people thought Rhodes had died in that same operation. But he didn't. He simply vanished, gone without explanation, without a trace. The man in the hoodie had searched for him once. Gave up when the trail went cold. But last night, something about the voice in that alley felt familiar. Not just the tone, but the cadence, the timing. Like someone who knew exactly how to speak without saying too much. Could it be Rhodes? If so, why now? Why here? Meanwhile, at the grocery store, something strange was happening. A store employee named Melina, who had quietly watched the entire shove unfold from behind the bakery counter, came forward to give her statement. But when she sat down with mall security, her story seemed off. She described the shove differently, said the veteran slipped and that Jordan tried to catch him. This contradicted what at least 5 other people said. When pressed, she grew nervous, almost rehearsed. And here's the thing, Melina wasn't just some random worker. A quick background check showed that she'd transferred to this location only a week ago. Before that, she'd worked in a small town 90 miles north, where a nearly identical incident occurred. Young man attacks elderly veteran in public. That case? Mysteriously unresolved. The attacker disappeared. The veteran refused to press charges. And Melina? She left the job 2 days later without warning. Too many coincidences to ignore. Even stranger, the small black object Jordan was handed before the shove? It never turned up. Not in his car. Not on his person. Not on the ground where the interaction occurred. It was like it vanished into thin air. But what if it wasn't a phone or a weapon? What if it was a signal? A tracker? A trigger for something bigger? The hooded man couldn't stop turning it over in his mind. Especially now that someone had tried to scrub the video and rewrite the narrative. He'd seen cover-ups before, firsthand. You don't serve in classified units without learning how stories get buried, how records get altered, how witnesses get redirected. But why all this effort over a teenage shove? What did someone have to gain from manipulating a seemingly small incident in a grocery store lot? Then came the twist that made everything murkier. Jordan disappeared. Vanished from his home 2 nights later. His mother, frantic, filed a missing persons report. No note. No texts. Just his phone left on the kitchen table and the charger gone from the driveway. But that's not the worst part. The car was found the next morning, abandoned at a rest stop off the interstate. Inside, the passenger seat was covered in what appeared to be fresh dirt and an unfamiliar black duffel bag containing nothing but burner phones, a knife, and a photo. A photo of the hooded man, folded, with the words "too late" scribbled on the back. And just like that, what started as a public confrontation turned into something far darker. Something planned. Something personal. The hooded man wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was being pulled into a past he thought he'd left behind. One where every move mattered. Every shadow could hide a threat, and every ally might not be who they seem. But the question remains, who wanted this all to happen? And why now? Because the next time someone steps out of the shadows, they won't be there to warn him. They'll be there to stop him. Across town, in a part of the city that barely registered on GPS and sat wedged between an abandoned rail yard and a crumbling row of warehouses, another piece of the puzzle quietly began to move into place. Monica Bennett, the nurse from the VA clinic whose number was still saved in the hooded man's burner phone, hadn't heard from him in nearly 3 weeks, not since he'd shown up at the hospital unannounced, asking questions about a patient no one else seemed to remember. She'd known him back when his uniform still carried rank and when his eyes hadn't yet learned to hide the weight they carried. He wasn't the kind of man who asked for help unless something was burning behind his calm. So when her phone buzzed just after midnight with an unmarked image message, her blood ran cold. It was a grainy photo, shot from what looked like a security camera mounted inside her apartment complex's stairwell. It showed her, just hours earlier, carrying groceries up the steps. Alone. Or so she thought. But in the far edge of the frame, halfway down the corridor, a blurred figure stood watching, hood up, head tilted slightly, not moving, not speaking. No message came with the image. Just the photo. As if to say, we see you too. It didn't make sense at first. Monica hadn't been to the scene of the parking lot incident, hadn't spoken to Jordan or his mother, hadn't even seen the veteran since his discharge. But years ago, back when the hooded man still went by a real name and carried a government-issued badge, Monica had patched him up after an op gone bad. A favor turned friendship. And now, it seemed, someone was digging into everyone he'd ever been close to, like they were tracing his past backwards, looking for pressure points to squeeze. She tried calling him. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. That silence was more chilling than anything, the kind of silence you only get when someone has gone dark on purpose. At the same time, an unexpected breakthrough came from the most unlikely place. A high school guidance counselor named Mr. Kessler, who had been working with Jordan for over a year. He'd just returned from a short vacation and was catching up on the flood of emails when he found one marked as urgent from Jordan's school email address, timestamped 2 hours before his disappearance. The subject line read only, "They know." Inside the body of the email was a short, panicked message. If anything happens to me, it's not what it looks like. Check the red folder. Top drawer. My locker. It was sent to Kessler and 2 others, one of whom had never been publicly tied to Jordan in any way, a retired journalist named Amanda Graves, who once covered war crimes and black operations before being forced into early retirement after a story she published was abruptly pulled from every media outlet under a national security risk designation. Her address had been private for years. No social, no press, just ghosted out of the system. Yet somehow Jordan had found it. Or someone had told him where to send the message. Kessler immediately went to the school, unlocked Jordan's locker, and found the red folder exactly where it was described. Inside were notes. Pages and pages of scribbled phrases, drawings, and printed emails, some with blacked outlines, others marked confidential or classified, do not distribute. It looked paranoid at first, scattered handwriting, circles around names, arrows pointing between phrases like "they know," "target list," and "roads equals not dead." But one detail stood out, a page torn from a vet intake form with Mr. Lawson's name on it. The same veteran Jordan had shoved. Scribbled in red ink were the words, "He remembers." What exactly was he supposed to remember? And why did it matter now? This discovery wasn't just strange. It completely undermined the original assumption that Jordan had acted on impulse or aggression. This folder suggested he had been manipulated, maybe even blackmailed. And now, with Jordan missing, Monica being watched, and the hooded man getting warning signals from ghosts in his past, everything was unraveling faster than anyone could follow. But one more twist was waiting, one that would throw even more shadows across an already dark landscape. The veteran, Mr. Lawson, the one whose fall had kicked this whole thing into motion, quietly checked himself out of the hospital that afternoon. He didn't tell staff. Didn't wait for discharge paperwork. Just folded up his belongings, left the signed bill on the nightstand, and walked out with a slight limp and a backpack that looked far too military-issued for a man supposedly out of the service for over a decade. But what chilled the nurse who later found the note wasn't that he'd left. It was what he'd written on the bottom of the hospital receipt in pencil. "He's not dead. And they know I saw him." Every thread was now unraveling in different directions. Jordan's vanishing act, Monica's stalking photo, the red folder of secrets, the corrupted surveillance footage, the veteran's sudden disappearance, and the silent reemergence of a man presumed dead. And yet somehow, each piece pointed back to a single truth buried under layers of lies. This wasn't about a shove, or even about Jordan. This was about something older, something hidden for years, and someone powerful enough to keep it that way. But what happens when secrets that were supposed to stay buried start clawing their way to the surface? Because somewhere, right now, someone's preparing to erase the next piece of the puzzle, and if they succeed, no one will know who to trust next. The realization didn't come like some cinematic lightning bolt. It crept in slowly, like cold seeping into your bones after standing too long in the rain. It started with a sound, something most people would dismiss. The subtle scrape of tires over gravel outside the hooded man's apartment, just past 3 a.m., a time when even restless cities sleep. He lived in the kind of building where everyone knew each other's habits. The late-night dishwasher from 2 floors up, the old woman who fed stray cats behind the dumpster, the couple that argued every Sunday about the thermostat. So when he heard a vehicle idling outside without headlights and no one getting out, he moved toward the window slowly, keeping the room dark. A black SUV sat across the street, windows tinted too dark for legal limits. No lights, no engine cut, just watching. He waited, barely breathing. At 3:17, the SUV rolled forward and vanished down the street without a sound. But the next morning, all 4 tires of his car were slashed, his rearview mirrors gone, and a note duct-taped to the windshield, 4 words scrawled in bold red marker. "You never left it." No signature, no symbol, just the statement. But to him, it was clear as day. Someone was telling him his past wasn't done with him. That morning shattered what little peace remained. He could no longer brush this off as coincidence or paranoia. Someone had eyes on him. And not just passive surveillance, this was tactical, calculated. The kind of fear that lives in your chest, not your head. He went to check on Monica, but when he got to her apartment, the door was already open, only slightly, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Inside, the place was torn apart. Not like a robbery. Not messy. Surgical. Every drawer had been opened, every cabinet cleared, but nothing valuable was missing. No TV. No jewelry. Her laptop sat perfectly centered on the dining room table, the webcam light on, recording. The screen showed a video feed, a still frame of the hooded man standing at her front door, time-stamped 10 minutes before he arrived. It was a clear message: "We knew you'd come." Monica wasn't there. Her phone was on the bathroom counter, its last message unsent. "I think someone's in." He stood there for too long, trying to decide whether to call someone, whether to run, whether to stay. But the pit in his stomach had already made the decision for him. They were ahead of him. They'd always been ahead. Whoever they were, they didn't just know his habits, they knew his instincts. They were using his protective nature against him, drawing him out, making him move, making him react. But to what end? He went back to the red folder, hoping for something he missed. Something that could give him a lead on where Jordan or Monica had gone. And then he saw it. Buried in a printout of an email thread from months ago, there was an attachment he'd overlooked. It wasn't a document. It was a link to a private video file hosted on a dark web server, access protected by a code that looked like a random string of characters. But when he entered the date of the Kandahar mission, it opened instantly. The video was only 12 seconds long, grainy, clearly filmed in secret. It showed a room, a concrete bunker with a man sitting in a metal chair, hands tied, face bloodied. A second man stood behind him, partially in shadow. And even though the clip cut off before either spoke, the hooded man froze the frame and stared. The man in the chair was Rhodes. Alive. Beaten. The man in the shadows? His build, his stance, it was unmistakable. It was Mr. Lawson. The implications hit hard. If Lawson had lied about being a retired vet with memory gaps, then everything changed. What if he wasn't just some helpless victim Jordan attacked? What if he was part of something much bigger, much darker? Was Jordan trying to expose him? Was the shove a message, not an attack? And if Lawson knew where Rhodes was, why hadn't he said anything? Or, more chilling, who was he really working for? His mind spun, but there was no time to process. As he stepped outside his apartment, heart racing, he spotted something shoved into the crack of his mailbox. A photo. New. Glossy. Taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. It showed him inside his kitchen, phone in one hand, folder in the other. There was no angle from which a civilian could have taken that shot. It had to have been through a window, his window. Written on the back, in the same red marker as before, "You're next." His breath caught. Not because of the threat, but because the photograph confirmed something terrifying. His safe space, his fortress of solitude, had already been breached. Whoever they were, they had been inside his home. Not just outside watching. Inside. Maybe while he slept. Maybe while he was in the shower. Maybe while he was standing right there, thinking he was still in control. And suddenly, the silence around him became deafening. Every parked car looked suspicious. Every stranger's glance felt loaded. Every step echoed too loud. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was survival. Because if they could get that close without leaving a trace, what else were they capable of? The questions came fast and hard. Was Jordan a pawn or a whistleblower? Was Monica taken? Or did she vanish to protect something? Who was pulling the strings behind Lawson? And more importantly, what were they trying to erase from history? Every answer seemed to collapse into more uncertainty, like someone was rewriting the narrative in real time, deleting truth and replacing it with confusion. He'd seen cover-ups before, but never this personal. Never this surgical. And the worst part was the sinking feeling that he wasn't just trying to uncover a mystery, he was becoming part of it. Somewhere out there, the truth was still buried. But now, someone was willing to kill to keep it that way. And they weren't done yet. Just when he thought the shadows couldn't stretch any longer, the plot twisted so sharply it nearly buckled beneath him. It happened in the least likely way, through a voice from the past. A blocked number rang as he was standing in line at a rundown diner outside the city limits, one of the few places left with no cameras, no Wi-Fi, no trace. He almost didn't pick up, but something about the moment felt heavy, faded even. The voice on the other end was gravel-thick and deliberate. "Stop chasing ghosts," it said. "They're not the danger. You are." Before he could ask who it was or what the hell they meant, the line went dead. No number to redial. No clue to follow. But that voice, he knew it. It wasn't just familiar. It was personal. And it wasn't Rhodes. It was someone who should have never been able to call him again. Someone buried, figuratively and literally, under layers of military deniability. Noah Granger. A name that hadn't crossed his mind in years. A name officially marked as Kia on a mission that had gone so catastrophically wrong, no one ever spoke of it again. Granger was dead. He had to be. Except he wasn't. And if that was true, then nothing about the story, the shove, the red folder, the veteran, the missing teen, the threats, was what it had first appeared to be. The war they thought they'd left overseas had followed them home, metastasized into something colder, more calculated, with operatives who weren't wearing uniforms but still pulling strings. The hooded man tried to keep his thoughts straight, tried to retrace the web, but the lines between past and present were blurring fast. He rushed back to his apartment, tore through the files again, searching for some reference, some breadcrumb that would connect the call to the rest of this nightmare. That's when he found it, on the back of one of the pages from Jordan's red folder. Faint. Barely legible under a smear of highlighter. A signature. Gee, just that. The same shorthand Granger used when signing internal comms during missions. It had been in front of him the entire time. Jordan hadn't stumbled into this conspiracy. He had been guided into it. But why? And by whom? Then came the moment that broke everything wide open. In a last-ditch move, he went back to the school, Not the main office or the locker, but the server room. A place few students even knew existed. He had no authorization, but he didn't care. Desperation trumps protocol. What he was looking for wasn't on paper. It was buried in the digital logs. Emails, login attempts, file transfers. He cross-referenced Jordan's email with remote server access and discovered something alarming. 2 days before the parking lot incident, someone had logged in under Jordan's credentials from a location across town, an IP address tied to a data node registered under the Department of Energy. Not the military. Not the VA. The DOE. That made no sense. Unless what Jordan had discovered wasn't just about veterans, or war, or even roads. It was about technology, energy, experiments. This wasn't about exposing a past injustice. This was about burying a program that had never officially existed. A project that had weaponized more than just soldiers. It had experimented on memory, on identity, on behavioral override. Human subjects had been involved. Volunteers and others. The kind of program that doesn't show up in FOIA requests because it's not on any public ledger. And suddenly the pieces clicked. Jordan's erratic behavior. Lawson's selective memory. Monica's silence. The shredded hospital records. They weren't hiding a war crime. They were hiding mind control. The push in the parking lot. It wasn't aggression. It was a signal. A trigger. A test. Someone had used Jordan to provoke Lawson, to see if a dormant program could be reactivated. The entire scene was orchestrated.
And it worked.
Lawson wasn't just a bystander. He was a living artifact of a program buried in black ink and redacted files. That's why he left the hospital. That's why he said he's not dead. Because maybe he wasn't talking about roads. Maybe he meant himself. Maybe he'd remembered who he really was and what had been done to him. And just as the hooded man began to grasp the scale of what he'd uncovered, he found something else. Tucked behind his fridge, a place he'd never put anything, was a burner phone that wasn't his. It buzzed once. No caller ID. He answered without a word. On the other end, a distorted voice whispered, "You're solving the wrong mystery." He tried to reply, but the line cut off again. No sound. Just silence. And then, across the street from his apartment, lights flickered in an empty building. For a split second, he saw a silhouette watching him. Not moving. Just standing there. The hooded man didn't know what scared him more, that someone had once again been inside his place, or that everything he thought he was fighting against might have been a distraction from something even worse. A decoy narrative designed to keep him chasing ghosts while the real truth stayed buried. And as he stared into the darkness across the street, one thought echoed louder than all the others. What if I'm not the hero of this story? What if I'm the experiment? And with that, the game changed completely. It all came crashing down the moment he saw Monica again, not at some safe house or meeting point, but unexpectedly, standing in the hallway outside his apartment like she'd never vanished. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her jacket soaked from the rain, her hands trembling as if she was holding a truth too heavy to carry on her own. She didn't wait for questions. She just walked in, dropped a flash drive on the table, and whispered, "They're not after Jordan. They're after you. They always were." The hooded man froze. For weeks, every instinct, every move, had been driven by the idea that Jordan had accidentally uncovered something bigger than himself. But now Monica, one of the few people he still trusted, was telling him that the entire thing had been bait.
And he was the mark. He couldn't breathe.
He asked her where she'd been, who had taken her, why she hadn't called, but her answers came in broken waves, guilt saturating every word. She hadn't been abducted. She'd run. Run because she'd known more than she let on. Because years ago, she'd worked at a lab under the DOE, just a desk job, data entry, she swore, but eventually she started noticing inconsistencies in the files she processed. Veterans with no medical history being cleared for high-level experiments. Names disappearing from official rosters. Psychological assessments being flagged and rerouted to private servers. She asked too many questions. Got reassigned. Got quiet. But when Jordan found her again, asking about his grandfather and a program called Vigilant Epoch, She realized the past she thought she escaped was back, and it had teeth. The flash drive she brought contained decrypted files that should never have existed. Patient logs, video surveillance, experimental trials. One file stood out, a report on Subject K, 17, a veteran with PTSD who'd been implanted with a neural feedback chip designed to suppress traumatic memories and replace them with programmable behaviors. The subject's name? Jack Lawson. The man Jordan had shoved in the parking lot. But what chilled him more was the second file. Subject K, 18. No photo. No name. But under handler access, it listed his own call sign, the same one he'd used during his last Black Ops deployment. The implications were dizzying. Had he unknowingly been a part of the very program he was trying to expose? Was he someone else's project? And if so, what was real and what had been planted? Then came the ultimatum, delivered not by some masked stranger or anonymous message, but by Monica herself. She told him there was a final file, still locked behind a secondary encryption, accessible only through a biometric scan.
His scan.
She could get them in. But once that file was opened, there would be no going back. The agency watching them wouldn't tolerate that kind of breach. They'd wipe the slate clean: names, homes, lives. The only chance they had to disappear safely was to walk away now. Burn the drive. Erase the evidence. Cut ties with Jordan, with Lawson, with the truth. They could leave tonight. New names, new state, new life. The offer was real. The fear in her voice was real. But so was the weight of everything they'd uncovered. He stared at her, torn between the woman he trusted and the mission that had consumed him. For years he'd blamed himself for the people he couldn't save. The soldiers lost. The memories erased. The lives destroyed by programs dressed up as treatment or innovation. He told himself that if he ever had the chance to expose it, he would. But now that the choice was in front of him, raw and bleeding, he hesitated. Not because he was afraid of dying, but because he was terrified that everything he knew about himself was a lie someone else wrote. And just when he thought he couldn't sink any deeper into doubt, a knock came at the door. Not a pounding threat. Just 3 slow, deliberate knocks. He looked at Monica. Her face drained of color. She mouthed, "They found us." But when he opened the door, it wasn't a government agent or some anonymous threat. It was Jordan.
Alive.
Breathing hard.
Clothes torn.
Eyes wide with desperation and fury. And in his hand, a USB drive stained with dried blood. He pushed past them and said one thing that shattered the room. "I know what they did to my dad." Everything stopped. All at once, the questions they'd been chasing flipped inside out. Because Jordan wasn't here for help. He was here for answers. And what he'd found might not just change the course of their investigation, it could collapse the whole damn system they were fighting. But before they could ask him what was on the drive, a second knock came. Not from the front door this time. From the back of the apartment. The one that should have been sealed, bolted, and untouched. They weren't alone. And now, every choice they made would cost more than truth. It would cost lives. The silence that followed the second knock was louder than any scream. It stretched across the room like a noose tightening around their throats. Monica instinctively stepped in front of Jordan, her body still trembling, while the hooded man reached beneath the kitchen drawer where he'd stashed a concealed sidearm months ago, back when he thought all he had to worry about was paranoia and ghosts. He motioned for them to stay quiet and crept to the back hallway, every footstep weighed with years of training and trauma. But when he reached the door, it wasn't some black-booted operative waiting on the other side. It was worse. It was Rhodes.
Alive.
Older, heavier, worn down by time but unmistakable. The man who was supposed to have died years ago in that jungle op gone wrong. The one they said didn't make it out. He didn't flinch when the gun was raised at him. He just raised his hand slowly and said, "You were never supposed to find out. Not like this." And that's when the last of the walls came crashing down. The conspiracy wasn't about Lawson. It wasn't about Jordan. It wasn't even about Vigilant Epoch. It was about a newer, deeper program. One that wasn't just about controlling behavior but engineering it, replicating personalities, transferring trained minds into blank ones, building soldiers from the inside out. The war hadn't followed them home. It had started here. Rhodes stepped inside, unarmed, resigned. He told them everything. After that fateful mission, he hadn't died. He'd been pulled, rescued, or kidnapped depending on how you looked at it, by a private military research contractor working under an untraceable branch of the Department of Energy. They'd offered him a chance to disappear, to be part of something world-changing. He agreed. At first, it was about finding ways to treat trauma, help soldiers reintegrate after war. But like everything tied to shadow budgets and national security, it spiraled. Human trials began. Memories were harvested, personalities overwritten. Ethics vanished. And when he tried to walk away, they buried his identity and told his family he was dead. But what broke the hooded man more than Rhodes' survival was his involvement. Rhodes hadn't just been a test subject, he'd been part of the team developing the tech. He'd helped write the protocols, draft the directives, decide who was eligible. And the man standing in front of him now, broken, ashamed, was admitting he'd used him. "You were one of the first," Rhodes said quietly. "I didn't know it would go that far. I thought I was helping you forget what couldn't be fixed." His voice cracked. But I was wrong. Monica was in tears. Jordan stood there, knuckles white around the USB drive, barely breathing. And the hooded man, who now didn't even know his real name, was reeling. Every mission, every nightmare, every blank spot in his memory wasn't some trauma response. It was part of a design system, programmed responses, installed like software. And suddenly, every face from the past blurred. Who had been real? Who had been built? The flash drive Jordan brought, it turned out, wasn't just bloody, because he'd been in danger. It was the danger. It contained an access key, stolen from a secure server, capable of waking up every latent subject implanted with the behavioral override system. According to Rhodes, there were hundreds, maybe more. Not just soldiers. Civilians. People in key positions, placed as ticking time bombs to be triggered when necessary. Embedded deep across the country. Police. Teachers. Drivers. Politicians. It had gone far beyond military containment. This was domestic infiltration on a level no one had imagined. But the drive wasn't the only thing drawing attention. Monica's appearance, Jordan's digital trail, the hacked school server, the security camera footage from the diner, it had all been picked up. An alert had been triggered somewhere. They weren't just being watched anymore. A kill team was already en route. Rhodes said they had 1 hour, maybe less. The choice was clear: run or reveal. They could disappear again. Burn every copy of the files. Live in shadows forever. Or they could upload the drive to a public server, push the data out to whistleblower networks, and risk exposing the biggest national security breach in American history. But doing so wouldn't just put them in danger. It would ignite a manhunt, destabilize trust in government institutions, and wake every implanted subject who'd been dormant for years. As the wind howled outside and sirens echoed faintly in the distance, the hooded man stared at the laptop screen, cursor blinking over the upload button. He'd been used, lied to, weaponized. But now, for the first time, he had a choice that wasn't made for him. Behind him, Rhodes was pacing, muttering regrets. Monica clutched Jordan, who had just lost every illusion of who his father really was. And outside, headlights appeared at the edge of the street, 4 SUVs, dark, moving in formation. Everything was coming to a head. And whatever decision they made in the next 60 seconds would reshape the future not just for them, but for every American unknowingly carrying the fingerprints of this program in their minds. And as the laptop screen flickered, one final realization hit him like a punch to the chest. He wasn't just fighting for the truth. He was fighting to prove he still had the right to choose it. The room was bathed in a dim, electric glow as the cursor on the laptop hovered over the upload button. Outside, the low hum of approaching engines swelled into an undeniable roar, 4 blacked-out SUVs rolled to a stop, military style, not a second wasted. The air shifted, heavy with finality, thick with dread. Inside, no one moved. Monica's fingers trembled against the wood of the kitchen table. Jordan stared through the curtains, lips parted in disbelief. Rhodes paced the floor like a man haunted by the shadows he helped create. And the hooded man, our main character, felt his pulse surge in his ears, louder than the helicopters now thumping in from the distance. The silence shattered when the front door exploded inward. Flashbangs hit like thunderclaps, drowning out Monica's scream and Jordan's cries. Smoke and light swallowed the room, turning vision into a blur of violence. Figures in full tactical gear flooded the space, guns drawn, shouts piercing through the chaos like sirens. But as quickly as they came, everything froze. Not because they were ordered to stop. Not because of resistance, but because of one man stepping in behind them. Clean-cut. Impossibly calm. Wearing no armor, no gun. Just a tailored black suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Director Nolan Trask. The real architect. Rhodes's face drained of color the second he saw him. Trask was supposed to be retired.
Gone.
Rumored dead in a helicopter crash overseas 5 years ago. But here he was, standing like the devil at the threshold, hands clasped, voice silk smooth. "It's over," he said, eyes locked on the hooded man. "You've come this far, and I admire the effort. But it ends tonight. That upload won't go through. Not because we'll stop you, but because you won't let it happen." For a moment, no one moved. Then Trask raised a small, black remote. He clicked it once. Suddenly, the hooded man staggered backward, clutching his head. His knees buckled. Screams spilled from his mouth as images flashed behind his eyelids like a film reel on fire. Memories, emotions, commands. Trask wasn't bluffing. The behavioral override protocol still lived inside him, deeper than even Rhodes realized. Trigger phrases, fail-safe commands. They could shut him down with the push of a button. They had done it before. "This isn't control," Trask said as he approached, lowering his voice to a whisper. "It's protection. For this country. From people like you, broken men who think pain equals wisdom. You think exposing us would help the world? You think chaos makes you righteous?" His gaze swept to Jordan, trembling beside his mother. "All it would do is turn him into you."
And that was it.
The line that broke something loose. Because even through the pain, through the searing flashbacks trying to rip his mind apart, the hooded man reached deep into himself, past the implanted commands, the synthetic triggers, the scripts, and found something Trask hadn't expected. Resistance. Not just muscle memory but will. A raw, human will that no program could overwrite. And with a guttural cry, he hurled the laptop across the floor. Not to destroy it, but to place it directly under Monica's foot. "Do it," he choked. Without hesitation, Monica stomped the spacebar. The upload started. Screams erupted. Trask lunged forward, ordering the team to seize them. A shot rang out. Rhodes tackled the nearest operative, taking a bullet in the shoulder but clearing the path. Monica shielded Jordan, and the hooded man, through the mental storm, sprang forward with animal fury. He crashed into Trask, the two men tumbling to the ground in a tangle of fists and blood. The room spun. Furniture splintered. Memories collided with reality as the hooded man saw flashes, briefings, test chambers, nights strapped to a table as his mind was rewritten. And then Trask whispered a final trigger. The hooded man paused mid-swing. Frozen. Just for a second. But it was enough for Trask to grab his throat and slam him against the wall. "You belong to me," Trask hissed. "You always have." And then a whisper.
Soft.
"Innocent. Dad," Jordan said, voice quaking. "Please." That single word, simple, fragile, cracked the program wide open. It cut through the neural fog like a scalpel. Not a command, not a phrase, but a plea from someone who loved him. That was the one thing the program never accounted for.
Love.
With a roar, he surged forward, reversing the hold, and slammed Trask's head into the countertop.
Once. Twice.
Until the man crumpled like a dying lie. The soldiers hesitated, stunned, as the upload reached 98%. 99%. 100%. A soft ping filled the air, every file. Every document, every name, every video, every covert operation from mind reprogramming to civilian implantation went live on a dozen whistleblower servers. Reddit exploded. TikTok blew up. Twitter, YouTube, encrypted archives. All of it was now public. The world watched in real time. Sirens wailed louder now. Police, news vans, maybe even feds. Everything changed in that moment. But then came the final twist. Monica turned to Rhodes. "I just got a message," she said slowly, holding up her phone. Her hands shook. Rhodes took it, brows furrowing. It was an alert from one of the buried subfolders in the data. Something triggered by the upload. Not a failsafe. A tracker. Every subject now knew. Every implanted sleeper, active or dormant, had just been pinged. And they were waking up. The hooded man stared at the screen, the last words glowing like a warning flare. Protocol reactivated. Phase 2 commencing. The conspiracy wasn't over. It had just begun. The sun broke over the horizon in a quiet suburb just outside D.C., casting long golden rays across the dew-damp grass and the shattered fragments of a world that could never return to what it once was. The air was calm, almost too calm for what had happened just hours before, when the truth surged out from the underground like a wildfire, setting fire to every corner of the internet, infiltrating headlines, live streams, trending hashtags, and millions of minds all asking the same question: how deep does it really go? The hooded man stood on a weathered pier overlooking a still lake, the wind brushing softly against his face like a whisper from the past. He had no name in the system anymore, no trail, no fingerprints. Officially, he didn't exist. But in the court of public opinion, he was becoming something else entirely, an anonymous symbol for the ones who had been used, discarded, silenced. The kind of name people typed into search bars with trembling hands, desperate to know more. And for the first time in his fractured memory, he wasn't running. He was watching. Behind him, Monica and Jordan sat on a bench, huddled together under a blanket. They hadn't spoken much since the upload. What could they say? A part of them was grateful the truth was out, but another part feared what might come next. Not everyone believed the files were real. Others were calling it the biggest national security breach in history. And then there were the warnings. People getting strange knocks on their doors. Phones suddenly wiped. Files vanishing from hard drives. Some of the subjects listed in the documents had already disappeared. It became clear that this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. Monica turned to Jordan, brushing a hand through his hair as she whispered, "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared across the water like he was trying to piece together where the nightmare ended and where real life resumed. Finally, he said, "He's not who I thought he was, but he's more than I ever imagined." Rhodes had survived the gunshot.
Barely.
He vanished from the hospital under a false name, leaving behind a letter that read more like a confession than a farewell. He admitted his role in the experiments, in the conditioning, in what they did to soldiers they claimed to be helping. But he also left something else, a flash drive. Inside it were files even deeper than what was released. Names that hadn't been included in the public drop. Codes, patterns, locations, dates stretching back decades. It wasn't over, and Rhodes knew it. His final words: "If you're reading this, they know I betrayed them. Which means they'll come for you next." But you already knew that. The hooded man stood silently as birds skimmed the lake's surface, rippling the stillness. A part of him wanted to disappear, to vanish into the world, and let the story end here. But deep down, he knew too much. He had seen the faces of children labeled as potential assets. He had been one of them. He couldn't walk away, not yet. He pulled a small device from his pocket. A second tracker. But this one wasn't theirs. It was his. Custom-built. Hidden in plain sight. With one press, he activated it, sending a signal not to the government, but to someone else. A small network of ex-operatives, journalists, whistleblowers. People who still believed the truth mattered more than silence. The signal was simple. Just one word. Ready. Far away, in cities across the country, lights turned on in basements. Encrypted chats lit up with alerts. Men and women who had been watching from the sidelines now had their cue. They weren't just waking up. They were mobilizing. Back at the lake, Monica rose and walked over, placing a hand gently on the hooded man's shoulder. "You sure this is the life you want?" she asked. "Running, fighting, digging through hell." He didn't answer right away. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, the scars on his knuckles catching the morning light. Finally, with a tired smile, he replied, "It's not the life I wanted. It's the one they gave me. But I'll make damn sure it's not the one Jordan inherits." Monica didn't press him. She just nodded. That was enough. And then, just as the wind picked up and the ripples began to fade, a phone buzzed. It was Jordan's. One new message. No name. No number. Just 5 chilling words. "You think it's over?" No one spoke. But they all knew. The story wasn't finished. The system never dies in one blow. It adapts. It waits. It evolves.
But now, so did they.
And somewhere, buried deep in the trending searches of millions, one phrase had already begun climbing the charts. The man in the hoodie. Not a ghost. Not a vigilante. But something in between. And the world was watching. Waiting. Wondering when he would strike again.